we're at a point in time coming off of a wild Saturday of college football. People are consistently peeking over at this board. He actually would not be my number one overall pick, nor would I bet him to be the number one overall pick. I think you got that next wave of NFL players, which is so enticing, which when you see Jaden Daniels come into the NFL and you go, I can get something like that with a guy with just as good an arm.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
I think the Washington Commanders are one of the best bets to win it all, or at the very least win the NFC.
Their offensive line, I do want to say one thing. It's very average. The coaching is good. They're getting good coaching from Bobby Johnson, their line coach, came from the Giants, but they've kind of overachieved. Let's call it like it is. Daniels has taken them up. Look, that division's not very good, and they could very well win it over the Eagles, and the Cowboys. They're not a Super Bowl team.
NewsWire, only on Sports.
Good morning. Welcome to NewsWire. As it's a football Friday here on the show, we'll preview all of college and pro football. We've got Bill Bender from Sporting News to preview some of the big games coming up this weekend. Also, our old friend Jacob Camenker will join us to preview some of the National Football League games. That and a whole lot more on this edition of NewsWire. So stay with us here on the grid for the next hour. I got you covered, and recapping everything that happened in Major League Baseball with some big games going down tonight, deciding games indeed. But let's first get to some recaps of what happened yesterday, in case you missed it. And last night, it was pretty much dominance from start to finish on Thursday Night Football, as the San Francisco 49ers did put an offensive clinic on in Seattle. They end up beating the Seahawks and move closer and closer to taking over the division. Not quite there yet. Obviously, they haven't had a good start, but this was the first step toward that. 36-24 the final. Brock Purdy throwing a couple of key touchdown passes to George Kittle, another one to Deebo Samuel. Also an injury coming out of this one as well, which we will tell you about in just a minute. But an impressive performance, to say the least. The 49ers not happy where they're at, says Kyle Shanahan, but definitely happy to get the win.
You know that we're sick about those two losses that we had. And we know, I talk about some losses are harder than others, and when you feel like you had those won, especially division games, that's made us sick about it. And we've gone on a stretch here the last 2 years where we've won a lot of games in a row, and a lot of the fourth quarters and some of those win streaks these last 2 years haven't been that tight. Guys have been able to relax a little bit and stuff, and we've been talking about how these two losses are a reminder on how the NFL works. And I think we got a little spoiled in that way of just human nature of sometimes feeling too relaxed, and you can never feel too relaxed. I thought we played real well in the second half, but that doesn't mean it's easy to win. And it's that's how it works. We played well. They played well. They came back and made some plays, which made it tighter, and I was glad that our guys could fight through that, realize that games are really never over where you can just sit and chill in the fourth quarter. You got to go beginning to the end, and we got that experience today.
Offensive explosion from San Francisco in the second half, which is not something that we've seen thus far this season. Meanwhile, a couple of weeks ago, Seattle and New Orleans riding high in their divisions. No longer the case, as both teams have completely fallen back. Geno Smith, quarterback of the Seahawks, said basically nothing went right last night.
Obviously, we did a lot of things that you don't want to do when you talk about winning football games. We didn't control the ball, didn't control the clock. turned the ball over, had penalties. All the things that we talk about every week, Like I said, man, when you play against good teams, well-coached teams, you can't shoot yourself in the foot. And, those are the things that we're doing right now. I mean, that's to be totally honest with you. We're just getting in our own way, and we got to, stop doing that. 3-3, got a long ways to go. A lot of football left. Shouldn't hang your head. I mean, we put ourselves in this position, you know what I mean? So, for me, man, get back to work, get back to doing the things I'm used to, which is playing clean football, good football, making the right plays, and, doing what's right.
Now, one key note out of last night's game, the name Jordan Mason must sound familiar to a lot of you, maybe some of you who play fantasy football, because Mason has been a star since Christian McCaffrey has not played at all this season. Unfortunately for Mason, he left the game with what they're looking at as a potential injury, undergoing further testing. Isaac Guerrero came into the game. He had a 76-yard rush. So there's a lot to talk about there from a fantasy perspective. We'll do that tomorrow here on Fantasy Sports Today. Meanwhile, Major League Baseball heading toward the ALCS and the NLCS one step closer for the New York Yankees. They hang on to beat the Kansas City Royals yesterday. A very spirited game, 3-1. Garrett Cole picks up the win. Giancarlo Stanton had a nice series for New York. 3-1 win means they await the winner of tonight's Tigers-Guardians game, but the Yankees definitely did just enough to get the job done in Kansas City, and their manager Aaron Boone says it's all in the cards to get to this point.
Yeah, I addressed the team before we started. Short and sweet. We get to go play for a pennant now. You talk about you get into spring training and you want to put yourself in position to be a playoff team, win the division, check. Now it's on to the ALCS. Certainly this hopefully is not the end of the road for us, and we expect more, but you got to savor these times too, because to get down to the Final Four here, and I feel like be in good shape from a team standpoint. I feel like we're playing well. I feel like we're pretty well rounded. We're not perfect, by any means, but I'll take our chances.
Yankees will be favored against whoever they play, whether it's Cleveland or Detroit, because we still are going to have to wait to see who wins this series. Game 5 is coming up on Saturday. Cleveland rallied behind a David Fry home run, biggest shot of their season, 5-4 the final. Cleveland led 5-3 in the 9th. Emmanuel Clase gave up another run, surprisingly, in the series, and 5-4 ends up being the final score. But needless to say, Detroit will have Tariq Skubal on the mound tomorrow to try and put this game away. But for now, Stephen Vogt, the manager of the Guardians, basically saying how emotional the win was last night.
Wow. Just such a great baseball game. I feel like every game this series has been a good baseball game. And for our guys to, score first, they come back, take the lead, we come back, back and forth. And just a tremendous job by, our bullpen, guys off the bench, defense. It was just a well-played baseball game on both sides and a lot of fun.
Definitely so. Will it be the same tonight? Deciding Game 5 in Los Angeles between the Padres and Dodgers. LA minus 142 tonight on the money line. Total of 8. Pitchers unknown. All hands on deck. It's that kind of game going into this evening. It should be a fun one at Chavez Ravine. Meanwhile, yesterday, for those of you who were wagering on DraftKings, may have found a little power outage on your app. A major sports betting operator suffered a complete outage, costing customers the opportunity to place wagers. DraftKings Sportsbook says they acknowledged they had an issue yesterday from Thursday morning right up until 2 p.m. Eastern. So it was kind of bad timing with some football and college football and NHL and Game 1 of the WNBA. But needless to say, if you logged on after 2 o'clock Eastern, you were able to place your bets. The Jacksonville Jaguars are getting set to play the Bears in London, and their arrival there is being delayed because of Hurricane Milton. The time of the Jaguars' flight was delayed slightly to a Friday morning arrival. Usually it is Thursday, but the game will be played as scheduled. James Cook, running back of the Buffalo Bills, didn't practice again on Thursday. Cook is in danger of potentially missing Monday night's football game against the New York Jets. Meanwhile, Malik Neighbors right now is in concussion protocol, as he has been last week. The Giants are hoping to clear him later today. And also George Pickens had some expletives written on his eye black during a football game. And as of right now, he's dismissing questions about it and says there's no purpose behind the message. The NFL is reviewing the message on the eye black. All right, let's get to some college football here. Red River rivalry coming up this weekend. Deion Burks, he is a wide receiver on the Sooners. Not expected to play versus Texas. The Sooners are missing a ton of players, including 5 wide receivers going into the weekend. Texas, 14.5-point favorites. Also, Quinn Ewers is going to start in that game. That's not a surprise. Last night in college football, JMU crushed Coastal Carolina. They won 39-7 and covered the 9.5 points. Tonight, it's a very big game in college football. Utah is road favorites at Arizona State. Cam Rising, the quarterback, is going to return and play in this game. All right, the Minnesota Lynx, they rallied down 18 to upset the New York Liberty. They've been the hot team in the WNBA all season, 95-93. So Lynx are up 1-0 in the best of 5. Although the best of 5 is short-lived because the WNBA made the announcement they're going back to a 7-game championship series next season. So that's pretty cool. Also, the WNBA expansion Valkyries have named aces Natalie Nakasi as their new head coach and their first head coach. She spent 10 seasons with the Los Angeles Clippers before joining the Aces coaching staff. We'll take a quick time out here on NewsWire. When we return next, it's time for us to dive into the college football slate, including the big one tonight between Utah and Arizona State. You're watching NewsWire here on SportsGrid. And we'll be back with Bill Bender from Sporting News right after this.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people. What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
I do a sliding DiVincenzo to the 1. Obviously, Terrence Shannon Jr., that is actually dynamic offensively and defensively. So we'll see how it works. I think it's a little bit of a work in progress. Do both teams win? Yes. I don't think at the end of the day, Minnesota could have afforded to keep Cat, Rudy, and Ant with that amount of money.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
I do think they come back, and I think they win this game, but they've got to do it decisively. I think they've got to get that confidence back because they went out there, and like I said earlier, Kentucky almost beat Georgia. Kentucky almost did beat Ole Miss, and I think what you're going to see in this conference, if you don't play well and you're a top 10 team in the SEC, you're going to get knocked out by one of those top 25 teams in the SEC if you're not ready to play.
Powered by SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Time to preview this week's slate in college football. Let's not make any promises about any results based on what we saw last week. Anything can happen, including a very big game tonight. I don't know that we thought this would be this at the beginning of the season, but here we are. Bill Bender is with us from Sporting News. And Bill, I mean, this is a game that Utah, to stay alive in the hunt, probably has to win. They're on the road at Arizona State. This is always a difficult place to play. And ASU sometimes, Bill, they're a strange team. Sometimes they show up and they look great. So other times they lay a complete egg. I don't know what to make of this game tonight, but I know Utah's defense is going to be tested.
It will. And Arizona State's one of the uniquely difficult places to play, regardless of how good the Sun Devils are. So you go to Tempe, and the proof in that is that Utah's 2-3 straight up there since joining the Pac-12. We have the Cam Rising factor. Is he going to play? It looks like he's finally going to be out there. Rising is one of 3 quarterbacks in the FBS with a QB rating over 200. The others are Jalen Milroe and Arch Manning. So, yes, he has a huge impact on the line if he plays. Utah's got to shut down Cam Scatterbo. Great running back, 5.6 yards per carry. I'm kind of like you. I've seen the line tick upward. I do think Utah is the better team and can win by a touchdown. But that is a tough environment, late night game, going to be a lot of fun to watch. So I'll go Utah by a touchdown, but it's a tough one.
Yeah, no, this is, to me, a tough one to call too, because again, ASU is not one of those teams week to week that it's super predictable. Their odds to make the college football playoff, by the way, are plus 310. And by the way, this is your last shot to get this if they win tonight, because this is going to be one that would shoot them down to like 2-1 or plus 250, something like that. All right, now let's go out to the West Coast again for Saturday's game between Penn State at USC. Of course, the Nittany Lions are one of the best teams in the country this year. Maybe people are sleeping on them. I'm not sure that people don't realize how good they've been. They're 4.5-point favorites with a very interesting travel time for them. I know they had to go to a different airport, saw that earlier in the week, Bill, to get out of Happy Valley and get to Harrisburg to get to USC. Trojans getting 4.5 points. I haven't been all that impressed with them this season. I think that's fair to say. 50.5 is the total here, so some points expected.
Yeah, and this is a back against the wall moment for USC. These heartbreaking losses at Michigan and Minnesota. We talked about that travel trend earlier in the week, but it bears repeating. Penn State hasn't played a regular season game on the West Coast since they played USC in 1990. 1991, they lost both games. USC's got to shut down the running game. They've given up over 5 yards per carry to Michigan and Minnesota. Penn State comes in there with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. They would be content just to run the ball and maybe set up a few shots for Drew Aller. I don't love this line. The Nittany Lions are the better team. I understand that. I would lean towards the over, though, because I think USC is going to hang in this game, make a few plays. Maybe the travel spooks me more than the players, Craig, but it's just proven, with these trends within the Big Ten this year between the West Coast and the Midwest teams.
Yeah, no, it takes a while to get going. These first half unders also seem to be coming in as well. Very clearly USC in conference play has had its struggles. They've, had some good wins, and, certainly I think that they're up against it when they play in this game, certainly in the Big Ten. Penn State's defensive rankings also, James Franklin has done a really good job, 11 points per game, 232 total yards per game. And we know that their defense has been stout, but again, with a total of 50, you have to think USC is expected to score 2 touchdowns or more in this game. Meanwhile, is an upset on deck on Saturday night. This is one of those lines that has really shot down. In fact, I think I'm seeing some 3s now on this game on FanDuel, if I'm not mistaken. Kansas State at Colorado. KSU is ranked 18th, and this line opened at 5. A lot of backing on the Buffs here, total of 56.5, and it is one of those classic potential upsets here with the ranked opponent visiting the unranked opponent. Colorado, Bill, it looked like they were headed to nowhere land, and then all of a sudden they put that thumping on UCF. They put themselves at least back in the positive picture.
And I think that's factored into this line here. When it was at 5, I'm taking Colorado. I'll take the points at home, knowing that they're 3-0 against the spread as a home underdog under Coach Prime. They've got the 2 best players in the Big 12, in Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, who's on pace to play 1,800 snaps this season. I mean, just think about that, 1,800 snaps. It's unbelievable. But as it's gone down to 3, I think there's a little bit of value in Kansas State here. They had their road meltdown a couple weeks ago. They are the second best rushing team in the Big 10 or Big 12, 250 plus yards. Dylan Edwards, a Colorado transfer, DJ Giddens, Avery Johnson. I think the 3 of those guys get it going on the ground against Colorado. This could be the most entertaining game out of all these games we've talked about this week, which is so crazy to me. And if Colorado wins, they will become a very hot ticket to win the Big 12 because we will have seen them beat BYU and Kansas State, something I never thought I would say 2 months ago.
Yeah, no, I mean, that game against UCF really turned things around. And by the way, that game was not close either. So they're playing good football. But again, total 56.5. It tells you K-State's going to score some points on the ground in this one, too. They've been great this season. Are you surprised when we look at the Heisman Trophy that Milroe did not move higher up? Is that because of the second half, you think, against Georgia? I fully expected him to be less than 5-1 after beating Georgia. Now, I know that they lost to Vanderbilt, but still, I mean, was that necessarily his fault? I'm not sure. They scored a lot of points in that game, too. I don't know. Why am I staring at Milroe? Still think he's got a great shot to win the Heisman. I know Alabama. I mean, Alabama, Bill, can't they just lose one game and he could still win? I don't understand this.
Because you're smart. That's why there's value in the quarterbacks, Craig. I think Jalen Milroe could get back in the mix with all these big stage games he has on the SEC. I think Cam Ward might be a touch undervalued, given that they came back from 25 points. Travis Hunter's a hot name, and I understand why. And Ashton Genty's kind of the flavor of the week. But Ashton Genty faces an uphill battle. He has to rush for like 2,500 yards, and Boise State has to be in the playoff mix. That's just how we vote. So Milroe, still some really good value on that, and get on it now before it's too late.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, is it Milroe's fault they give up 40 points to the Commodores? I don't understand how that works, how that affects his Heisman odds. But went from much higher, of course, last week to this week. But I guess that's where we're at. All right, Bill, enjoy the weekend. We'll catch up again next week. We'll be right back.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people. What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
I do a sliding DiVincenzo to the one. Obviously, Terrence Shannon Jr., that is actually dynamic offensively and defensively. So we'll see how it works. I think it's a little bit of a work in progress. Do both teams win? Yes. I don't think at the end of the day, Minnesota could have afforded to keep Cat, Rudy, and Ant with that amount of money.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
I do think they come back, and I think they win this game, but they've got to do it decisively. I think they've got to get that confidence back because they went out there, and like I said earlier, Kentucky almost beat Georgia. Kentucky almost did beat Ole Miss, and I think what you're going to see in this conference, if you don't play well and you're a top 10 team in the SEC, you're going to get knocked out by one of those top 25 teams in the SEC if you're not ready to play.
Powered by SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. It's time to dive into the latest in the injuries in the NFL, and who better to talk about that than Dr. David Chow of SICScore.com. It's time now for the SportsGrid Sound Off. Well, things were not pretty for the Saints on Monday Night Football, especially in the fourth quarter when Derek Carr was sacked and had to leave the game, underwent an MRI, and it showed an oblique strain. So the question is for Carr, how long will he potentially be out? Is this weeks? Is this months? It will affect certainly a lot of things that Carr has to do on the field, and we know that he's going to miss this week for sure. Here's Dr. Chow with the latest injury update on the Saints starting quarterback.
Derek Carr suffered a left oblique injury, muscle injury to his core. It affects rotation, therefore affects his throwing ability. It's already said he's going to be out for at least this Sunday. The speculation is multiple weeks since they play Sunday and then Thursday. Given the recovery timeline of oblique injuries and the potential for injection, we do see Derek Carr missing time this Sunday, but perhaps returning to play the following Thursday versus the Denver Broncos on October 17th, expecting an earlier return for Derek Carr than most pundits are saying right now.
I think right now it's fair to say that we'll keep an eye on Carr in the future, but with Spencer Rattler at the helm, who knows? Maybe this is a good start for him. Could he potentially keep going? Wait and see. All right, no wait and see for the Tennessee Titans. They are back this week after the bye. Last time we saw Tennessee, they did not play well against the Miami Dolphins. Needless to say, Will Levis was hurt in the game, also threw an interception in the game. Not really sure what his status is going into the week, but he's expected to play. If not, Mason Rudolph would get most of the snaps. Here's Dr. Chow on Levis's status.
We said in game week 4, it was more coaching decision than injury. Yes, he was injured, right AC joint, but he could have returned to play. He already threw a pick, so head coach Brian Callahan elected to go with Mason Rudolph and got a key victory for the Titans. Now after the bye, Levis's shoulder is even better. He is able to play. He can be the starter. The head coach has said he is our starter when he's healthy, but does he need to be 100% healthy to be the starter? He's healthy enough to play. It is a coaching decision. He may not be 100%. It'll be interesting to see who Callahan goes with this week for the Titans in week 6.
We're not really sure at this point, which what makes it a little bit intriguing to say the least. Now, the Indianapolis Colts, they've had quarterback issues all season long. Richardson's been in, been out. Flacco's done a nice job. The question is, who is Richardson and or Flacco throwing to now that Michael Pittman has been placed on injured reserve? Here's an update on the Colts' #1 wide receiver.
Michael Pittman, #1 wide receiver, just put on injured reserve for his back, missing at least 4 games. Jonathan Taylor already missed last week with a high ankle sprain. It was said to be mild, but there's no such thing as a mild high ankle sprain for a running back. This is the same ankle as before. We see him missing again here in week 6. And finally, Anthony Richardson. He is a coaching decision. He had a right hip pointer oblique injury, better this week, missed last week. He won't be 100%, but Shane Steichen has the decision to make. A less than 100% Anthony Richardson or Joe Flacco, his backup. That will be interesting to watch. Go to sicscore.com for all the latest injury updates and analysis.
All right, thanks to Dr. Chow for that. Injury updates going on around the league. The Houston Texans are hoping to get starting running back Joe Mixon back on the field this week, and nobody wants to play more than Mixon. Just ask him.
You got out there, I was #1 in the league in rushing. I want to be out there. You know what I'm saying? Like, other than, obviously I was stopped because of that weak-ass hip drop tackle. You know what I'm saying? So I can't do nothing about that. I want to be out there more than anybody. You know what I'm saying? So obviously it's frustrating, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. I'm going to just keep on working, and when it's time to, be out there, I'm going to do what I got to do to show I'm the best on the field. Simple as that.
Mixon does look good potentially to play this week for Houston. Also some good news on the practice report for the Cincinnati Bengals, as Zach Moss, who left last week's game against the Ravens with a leg injury, did practice today. So there's a chance that Moss could be back with Chase Brown at running back. Friday is filled with injury report information, trying to give you as much as we can here on the show. All right, coming up next, the G2E, of course, going on in Las Vegas. We'll hear from Matthew Waters from Legal Sports Report on the very latest when we return after this.
with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people. What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
If you're sliding DiVincenzo to the what? Obviously, Terrence Shannon Jr., that is actually dynamic offensively and defensively. So we'll see how it works. I think it's a little bit of a work in progress. Do both teams win? Yes. I don't think at the end of the day, Minnesota could have afforded to keep Cat, Rudy, and Ant with that amount of money.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
I do think they come back, and I think they win this game, but they've got to do it decisively. I think they've got to get that confidence back because they went out there, and like I said earlier, Kentucky almost beat Georgia. Kentucky almost did beat Ole Miss, and I think what you're going to see in this conference, if you don't play well and you're a top 10 team in the SEC, you're going to get knocked out by one of those top 25 teams in the SEC if you're not ready to play.
Powered by SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Hey, Matthew Waters is back with us once again from Legal Sports Report. We got a lot to get to here on the show. G2E, of course, wrapping up in Las Vegas. We'll have some news on that. Also a study about players playing in college football getting harassed quite a bit, at least according to this study. We'll tell you more about that. Matt, thanks again for coming on NewsWire. I know this is 2 days in a row for you. Thanks for making the time.
I'd make it 5 days in a row if I could, Craig. Always happy to be here.
Oh, look at that. Look at that. All right. Good job by Matt. All right. So G2E, of course, a fantastic event. SportsGrid out there covering it for us as well in partnerships. And I just think it's a phenomenal event. The Hard Rock CEO speaking out there. Of course, this affects Florida and affects a lot of other places as well. And for those people who are unfamiliar with the setup in Florida is that Hard Rock has exclusive rights to sports wagering in the state of Florida. We had heard a report that potentially they'd be at least open to the idea of having another company step in, but it was really unclear as to how and what and where, and maybe you can sort of clear up some of this complicated story for me, Matt.
Well, I can't clear up that much of it, Craig, but the story here is that the door is still open for potentially DraftKings, FanDuel, maybe a quote marquee brand is what Jim Allen called the DraftKings and FanDuel. Look, they do have exclusivity. Hard Rock is owned by the Seminole Indians. And Craig, you know about this as a Florida resident, but a few years back, there was an amendment that passed that said voters would have to agree on any expansion of gambling. That didn't happen with sports betting because it came through a compact agreement with the Seminole Indians. DraftKings, FanDuel, and a whole bunch of people tried to fight back on that pushback, and eventually they failed. And now we have exclusivity through 2051 for Hard Rock in Florida. But Jim Allen is a fantastic businessman, and he knows that having good brands means something. He said, quote, "We do recognize that long-term, some type of strategic relationship with some of the brands that really have marquee value could be helpful to both of us. We're receptive to those conversations." And he noted that he had already had conversations with both DraftKings and FanDuel this week at G2E. So don't know where that leaves us. He said a couple months ago that it would be premature to even start thinking about what a revenue share could look like before knowing if that would be a possibility moving forward with the court case still in flux. There is a revenue share program. If any of the pari-mutuels in Florida wanted to get on board with Hard Rock Bet, Craig, they could promote the app. And then any revenue that came through customers that they signed up through their promotions, they would actually keep 60% of that, while Hard Rock would get 40% of that. Don't know that that would be a similar kind of breakdown for DraftKings and FanDuel. Don't know how low they would be willing to go in order to get into Florida. But Florida is a great market that sportsbooks want to be in just for the cachet of it alone, huh? You know, if somebody's going on vacation, and they can bet with DraftKings or FanDuel and not just Hard Rock Bet. And on the other side of that, Jim Allen knows that there are just some people out there that want to bet with sports books like DraftKings and FanDuel. They're just names that they know. It's what they feel comfortable with. So it seems like it could be a win-win, and it's great that the door is still open, but we just don't know when any kind of deal may actually happen.
Yeah, and it does make some sense also for Hard Rock. There's going to come a point where all the bonuses and all this, you know, the CPA, cost per acquisition, all the people essentially that they've gotten are they're going to get, you know, that's going to run out. I don't know if it's a year or 2 or 3 from now. And then at that point, it does make sense for a new company to come in, offer new bonuses. All of a sudden, Hard Rock's getting a piece of that action too. So do understand the notion for it. We'll see what happens in the next year or two. All right, now this is a study that nobody wants to see, hear, or read. This is about the NCAA looking into some potential harassment for their student athletes surrounding sports betting. And Matt, I just think eventually we're going to get to a point where even though the players are now being paid through NILs and everything else, in the end, they still are student athletes, still young, most under the age of 21. You know, I mean, eventually maybe there is a chance that sports betting from a props perspective on these players goes away. You're never going to eliminate the games, and I'm not suggesting they should eliminate that either. But player props is really what's the driving force, I think, behind this. Yeah,
you're right, Craig. And you're right. It's not, you can't just look at these kids now. They're still kids, 22, 23 in college. What do they know about the world just yet, right? I mean, it's hard to sit back and say, well, now they're being paid, so you can say whatever you want about them online. No, you can't. And this study showed some real ugliness that comes out from people online. Sports betting happened to be the third most common topic for abuse targeted toward NCAA athletes, coaches, or officials throughout the tournament and championship period of a number of sports: volleyball, softball, baseball, and football was in there, but really, Craig, it was basketball. 80% of these about 5,000 harassing comments that they found, 80% of them came during March Madness, men's and women's, from the second round on. Craig, I'm not going to get into the specifics of what these messages said. They're pretty rough. They're pretty terrible, some of them. And it's interesting to see how the study by the Signify Group, they dive into, whereas, for the male athletes, people get angrier for them not cashing their bets. Whereas for female athletes, they talk about, cheating or potentially match fixing, or the sexist comments. The sexist comments, unfortunately, they were second. Sexual abuse was the overall top thread for abuse comments. It was really a shame. And you mentioned it, Craig, that the NCAA is asking states to stop accepting these props on college players. And states have tackled college differently when they've rolled out their laws. Some of them don't allow you to bet on in-state teams. Some of them don't allow you to bet on props. Some of them don't allow you to bet at all, like Oregon. But I think that we probably will start to see more states adopt this no prop betting on college kids thing. We already saw a couple of states have done it since the NCAA asked for it. And when Ohio broke it out, they actually had a little study that went along with it. And it was like 1% of handle or less came down to these bets. So it's easy to find that money elsewhere. It's easy to pivot away from it. And I agree with you that I think we're going to be doing a little bit more to protect these students going forward.
Yeah, and speaking of which, our last story is more about protection, global gaming challenges, companies from the U.S. and abroad talking about strategic dialogue with the AGA, American Gaming Association. I mean, all these are really good topics to talk about. It feels like this has been a hot topic of the year, responsible gaming. How much of it has to do with this?
Yeah, definitely, Craig. This is just another thing. This is the American Gaming Association, the European Casino Association, and the Betting and Gaming Council, which handles the gambling in the UK, about 90% of the operators there. They're basically partnering. They signed a memorandum of understanding saying, look, if shady stuff's going on, we'll let you guys know about it. You let us know about it. And it's not just sports betting, it's casino in general. A couple years ago, Craig, there was a scandal where people were going around and filming video slot machines and looking for patterns or imperfections or anything that they could call out. And it hit Europe and Asia before it hit the US. And if there was something like this in motion back then, it would have been better information sharing. They could have found out about it. So I think everybody knows that, the world is a pretty small place these days with how easy it is to talk and share information. So why not just try to make gambling a little bit safer for everybody?
Yeah, would agree. All right, Matt, great job last couple of days. Thanks again for coming on NewsWire. Appreciate it.
Thanks, sir.
All right, Matthew Waters from Legal Sports Report. Up next, Jacob Camenker from Sporting News, formerly now of the USA Today. He's up next.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people. What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
If you're sliding DiVincenzo to the one, obviously Terrence Shannon Jr., that is actually dynamic offensively and defensively. So we'll see how it works. I think it's a little bit of a work in progress. Do both teams win? Yes. I don't think at the end of the day Minnesota could have afforded to keep Cat, Rudy, and Ant with that amount of money.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
I do think they come back, and I think they win this game, but they've got to do it decisively. I think they've got to get that confidence back because they went out there, and like I said earlier, Kentucky almost beat Georgia. Kentucky almost did beat Ole Miss, and I think what you're going to see in this conference, if you don't play well and you're a top 10 team in the SEC, you're going to get knocked out by one of those top 25 teams in the SEC if you're not ready to play.
Powered by SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Our old friend Jacob Camenker is with us here on the show. And, of course, now he's doing great work over at USA Today. And you can find him, of course, on social media and USA Today Sports. If you've been following him on social media, I don't know how last week went for Jacob. I know that he got off to a hot start picking games this season. Of course, after he's not on the air with us, that's when all the money starts to flow in naturally. That's how it works, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, I got off to a hot start, but I haven't been here with you guys. But now I'm back, and hopefully we can stay hot and continue to hit on all these games, especially those primetime ones, all right?
Yeah, definitely the case. All right, so first and foremost here, let's get to some quick news, Jacob. Just give me 30 seconds on this. But I guess it is surprising to see today that Malik Neighbors of the Giants has been ruled out with the same concussion that he had, less than 2 weeks ago. Certainly this is really not a good sign for the Giants. He has been one of the big rookie wide receivers in the NFL this year, and Daniel Jones' his favorite target.
Yeah, without Neighbors, the Giants offense, they looked good against the Seahawks last week. So maybe there's some hope that against a weak Bengals defense, they'll still be able to produce. Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton both played well, and Tyrone Tracy had his first big game of his rookie season. So there's still some hope that in a weaker matchup, the Giants will be okay. But the longer Neighbors remains out, the more concerns there are about that offense, especially knowing that Daniel Jones at any time can just implode with turnovers and interceptions and sacks. So it'll be interesting to see if they can repeat their performance last week, or if the Bengals will kind of catch up to them with Neighbors being out.
Yeah, we'll see. That's the big news today in the NFL. All right, so first game on the slate Sunday morning will be Jaguars-Bears playing the game overseas in London. Total of 44.5. The Bears have played better football this season than they did last year. The Jaguars have not. But honestly, Jacob, the Jaguars are better than this 1-4 than they are. I mean, I got to tell you, I know that they've made some big mistakes, and that's how they lost games. They gave away a couple of games. They almost gave away a game last week. I don't think they're a good team by any means. But at the end of the season, Jacob, when we look back on Jacksonville, I can tell you they're not going to be 3-14. You know, like they're going to have some wins, 6, 7, something along those lines. The question is this one of them?
I agree with you. I think the Jaguars are probably the side to back here. I think that they can win this game. I know that they don't always have the advantage in London, but I think in this circumstance they will, because Caleb Williams has shown flashes of brilliance as a rookie, but he's still just a rookie. He's still going to be making his first overseas start, and that can just throw guys off a little bit. We've seen it before. We've seen it before with the Packers when Matt LaFleur made his first overseas coaching appearance in London. He was thrown off by the time change. So I think the Bears, where they're a young team, they're going to have some issues with that compared to the Jaguars, who are very used to playing in London. And I look at the Bears secondary right now with Tyreek Stevenson and Jaquan Brisker already ruled out for this game. That worries me. That leads me to believe that Trevor Lawrence is going to be able to move the ball downfield through the air better than he has at times this season. And I know the Jaguars don't have a very good defense, but I think if you get into a shootout, I would side with the more experienced quarterback in an unfamiliar environment. So that leads me to want to lean on Lawrence and the Jaguars. And yeah, they're definitely not going to be as bad as they've been to start the season. I think they're going to shore things up offensively and have to win that way often. But I think that they're going to be closer to maybe a 7-10 team by the end of the year if all goes well.
Yeah, and remember, that's 6 more wins between now and December. I mean, that's a lot. Maybe this is one of them. And I don't know that that's going to save Doug Peterson at the end of the season. And again, a little bit more troubling, I think, maybe for me on him than it is on the Jaguars, only because of these mistakes that they've made, Jacob. I remember Etienne fumbling through the end zone and then going for it on their own 20 against Miami. That was bizarre. Last week, it looks like they have the game completely in hand. All you have to do is cover this dude Pierce on the Colts. They couldn't do that. This guy's running all over the field. So I think even 7 wins is probably going to cost Peterson his job at the end of the season, or even 8 wins as well. That's not my take on the Jaguars this season. Again, I think they're better than what they've shown, but I don't think it'll be good enough for him to survive.
I agree with you there too. I think Doug Peterson, he bought a lot of time for himself when he came in, took over for Urban Meyer, and brought them to the playoffs that first season. Trevor Lawrence looked like a quality starting quarterback that first year under Peterson after, really struggling under Meyer. So I think that bought him some time, but the Jaguars simply haven't taken that step forward. And Lawrence is kind of plateaued, and we've seen some issues with injuries and turnovers with him. So I think they might make a change at the end of the year if things continue to go this direction. And if they do somehow lose both of the games they're playing in London the next 2 weeks, he could join that list of coaches fired after a trip to London, though I don't think they'll lose to the Patriots next week.
No, I don't think so either, regardless of who's at quarterback. All right, so the Packers 5.5-point home favorites against the Cardinals. Cardinals pulled off that huge upset last week, but Green Bay back to big favorites this week with a total of 47.5. Any lean on this game here?
I think my lean would be to trust the Cardinals, as strange as it sounds. I just want to see Jordan Love play a mistake-free game at some point this season. He's struggled with interceptions this year. He's got 5 that's, I believe, tied for the 3rd most in the NFL, but his interception percentage is 4.4%, which is 3rd highest behind only Anthony Richardson and Will Levis, who aren't exactly the most trustworthy quarterbacks so far this year. So I just worry about the possibility of him, getting the Packers out to a big lead against a bad defense, but then having one key turnover late that allows the Cardinals to get a backdoor cover, because Arizona's offense is good. Their defense isn't, but I think you can trust Kyler Murray to kind of get the late cover here.
All right. Finally, last game we'll discuss, Buccaneers at the Saints. Bucs 3.5-point favorites. Jacob, listening to radio, watching shows like ours, I can't find one person to take the Saints this week. So that tells me they're winning this game, right? Like I can't find anybody on New Orleans at all.
I can't be on New Orleans either, which scares me for that reason. But you just look at their offense without center Eric McCoy, since he went down very early in week 3. With McCoy, they averaged 45.5 points per game and 405.5 yards of offense. Without him, 16.3 points and 268.3 yards per game. So not exactly a recipe for success with a banged up O-line and a rookie quarterback.
Yeah, I would agree, although the Saints have dominated the Bucs in that building for a long time. Jacob, great to see you once again. Thanks again for coming on.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people. What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
If you're sliding DiVincenzo to the one, obviously Terrence Shannon Jr., that is actually dynamic offensively and defensively. So we'll see how it works. I think it's a little bit of a work in progress. Do both teams win? Yes. I don't think at the end of the day Minnesota could have afforded to keep Cat, Rudy, and Ant with that amount of money.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
I do think they come back, and I think they win this game, but they've got to do it decisively. I think they've got to get that confidence back because they went out there, and like I said earlier, Kentucky almost beat Georgia. Kentucky almost did beat Ole Miss, and I think what you're going to see in this conference, if you don't play well and you're a top 10 team in the SEC, you're going to get knocked out by one of those top 25 teams in the SEC if you're not ready to play.
Powered by SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid as we wrap up our week of shows. It's time now, of course, to get to some last licks. We will cover a little Major League Baseball, a little memorabilia, and also this saga going on with a player on the New York Jets. Time now for some last licks. All right, let's start off with this Son Reddick story. We would like to have a picture of him on the Jets, but the problem is he still hasn't reported to the Jets. You may remember this offseason. That was a big trade for them, acquiring him for a draft pick, but Reddick has already missed 5 games. He's forfeited $800,000 per game, about $4 million, and on top of it, about $5 million in fines. So in total, Reddick has lost about $9 million, so it shouldn't become a surprise at this point that he and his agent have parted ways. Now, at least according to some of these reports I'm seeing, it's the agent that no longer wants to represent Reddick. But I got to be honest with you, isn't it the agent that's giving Reddick advice to sit out as long as he has? I mean, maybe that has changed. Maybe he's told him to report. We really don't know as this saga continues. But the bottom line is we're going to get to about the halfway point in the NFL season, and then he's going to have to make the decision to either report or sit out the year. And if he does, I don't think that's going to affect him whatsoever because he's going to have to make the same decision again next year. We saw this kind of happen with Jamar Chase. Chase chose to play, and look at the season that he's having right now. Looks like he made the right choice. Did Reddick make the wrong one? What happens if the Jets aren't good this season? I mean, that's a possibility too. So wait and see. We'll see if Reddick gets a new agent to give him some better advice, or any advice for that matter. Meanwhile, World Series streaks coming to an end for a pitcher. This time it is Will Smith. Last night, his postseason run ended. It is a streak to remember. Will Smith, left-handed pitcher, won the World Series in 2021 with the Atlanta Braves. In 2022, he won it with the Houston Astros. And 2023, he won it with the Texas Rangers. He was on the Kansas City Royals. He came over to their team this season. And with the Royals being knocked out by the Yankees last night, that officially comes to an end. Definitely a good luck charm if you want to get to the playoffs. If you want to get past the first round, Will Smith's probably your guy. But we know it takes a lot more to get to the ALCS, and not enough for Will Smith. And by the way, Will Smith probably going to play for another team, a new team, if he wants to continue playing next year. He's had a long career already, by the way, and a really good one. All right, we saw some reports that there was a discrepancy on the bases that Hank Aaron rounded when he hit home run number 755. In fact, they were being sold by like 2 different places, which tells you that there were some fakes out there. This is the nature of memorabilia. But as it turns out, the plot gets a little bit thicker because the Atlanta Braves are suing an ex-employee allegedly for taking some of this memorabilia, including the bases that Hank Aaron rounded, and maybe even selling them to an auction house without their knowing. So maybe this gets closer and closer to solving the issue. And again, you have to remember, back in the 1970s and really even in the 1980s, there really wasn't a lot of digital photography to be able to identify properly and photo match what some of this stuff is. I mean, a base is a base from the 70s. It's dirty, it's white, it's a base. But maybe, getting to the bottom of it with this employee, finding out what he did with it, who he gave it to, and sort of this trail can lead us to the point where we figure out exactly where the legitimate bases are. There's, I think, some in the Hall of Fame and 2 others in different auction houses. But again, it's Hank Aaron, and it's one of the most historical moments in the history of Major League Baseball. Hopefully they figure this out. Maybe the ex-employee will end up saying, hey, look, here's what I did with them. Hopefully. All right. Bare knuckle fighting is coming up here at the top of the hour from 12 to 1 Eastern. So make sure you stay tuned to that. And as a reminder, tomorrow here on Fantasy Sports Today, you can catch me and George Kurtz from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Eastern. We got plenty to cover here. Lots of injuries in the NFL. We'll give you an update on Jordan Mason, an update on Malik Neighbors, and all of the late injury news and notes from Friday. Some of these things come down usually later in the day. We recap and go over all of that for you tomorrow morning right here on FST. Thanks again to Jacob Camenker from USA Today. Also, thanks to Bill Bender for coming on the show, and Matthew Waters from Legal Sports Report. Thanks to Luke for all of his work all week, as well as Frank for directing, Frank for producing the show. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning here on this next edition of Fantasy Sports Today. And if fantasy isn't your thing and NewsWire is, that's awesome too. I'll see you back here Monday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern, for our next edition of NewsWire. Enjoy all the baseball tonight, football this weekend, and some hockey as well. See you back here Monday. Have a great weekend.